Have you ever experienced a moment when everything seemed to fall apart, and exactly when you needed to hear God's voice the most, all you got was silence? Have you felt the crushing weight of unanswered prayers, questioning if God really hears or even cares about you? These doubts don't mean your faith is weak or that you're alone in your struggle. In fact, Scripture reveals that even the greatest heroes of faith endured times exactly like these. Consider the story of Job, for instance. A righteous, blameless man who lost absolutely everything: family, wealth, and health. He cried out, questioned, pleaded for answers, yet God remained silent. Or perhaps you relate more closely to King David, author of so many Psalms, who in moments of anguish cried out, "How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever?" Psalm 13:1. David, a man after God's own heart, experienced this troubling silence. Yet there's an even more powerful example: Jesus Christ, hanging on the cross, facing unimaginable suffering. In his deepest agony, even he cried out loudly, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. If the very Son of God experienced this apparent abandonment, perhaps the silence you're facing right now holds a deeper purpose than you can imagine. We often interpret God's silence as abandonment or punishment. But what if the silence means exactly the opposite? What if, instead of absence, it signals an even deeper presence, an invitation into genuine trust? Imagine silence as a dark room, initially frightening. Yet once your eyes adjust, you begin to notice details you previously overlooked. In this uncomfortable silence, God often does his deepest work in your heart. God's silence isn't new or unique to your journey. Reflect again on Job's story. For a long time, God stayed silent while Job suffered intensely. There were no quick answers, clear explanations, or immediate relief. Yet this didn't mean God was distant. On the contrary, God was present, observing every tear and listening to every word. In silence, he was preparing Job for something greater, something Job couldn't yet see in his pain. What about you? Could the painful silence you're experiencing now actually be a period of preparation and growth? Perhaps God is allowing this spiritual desert so you can learn to trust him more deeply. Like a seed buried in dark soil before blooming beautifully, maybe your darkest moment is precisely where God is awakening new life within you. Perhaps you've asked in prayer, "Why me, Lord? Why now? What have I done to deserve this?" Don't blame yourself for these questions. Even the strongest believers have deeply questioned their circumstances during difficult times. God isn't surprised or disappointed by your questions. In fact, he expects and desires your honesty, as a child seeks to understand their father's heart. Remember King David, who openly expressed his pain and doubt in the Psalms. In Psalm 22:2 he writes, "My God, I cry by day, but you do not answer. By night, but I find no rest." David didn't hide his anguish, yet he never stopped trusting God. Through such honest vulnerability, he developed authentic, resilient faith, capable of enduring storms and doubts. God allowed David these emotions to deepen and strengthen his faith. Look at your own life. Perhaps this silence you're facing is exactly the tool God is using to shape your faith. Maybe he's permitting this spiritual desert to show you that true faith isn't feeling God's presence constantly, but trusting him even when you can't sense him. True faith doesn't depend on circumstances, but rests in the absolute certainty of who God is, regardless of what you're feeling. Have you ever thought God's silence might be exactly where he accomplishes the most profound transformations in your life? As strange as it sounds, God often uses these moments of apparent absence to refine your heart like gold tested by fire. Gold must endure extreme heat to remove impurities. Without this intense heat, it would never become pure and precious. Similarly, God allows difficult periods to perfect your faith and character. Think about the disciples caught in a violent storm, terrified, believing Jesus didn't care as he slept calmly. They desperately asked, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Mark 4:38. How often have you asked that question during your own storms? Jesus' silence wasn't abandonment, it was absolute trust. He knew everything was under control even when his disciples didn't. And maybe that's how it is with you right now. Perhaps God remains silent because he already knows the outcome of your story. He sees beyond your current storm. His silence isn't neglect. It's an opportunity to strengthen your faith and teach you to rest amidst chaos, knowing he's fully in control. If God is silent, perhaps it's time to silence the voices shouting within you as well. Perhaps he's waiting for you to calm your restless mind and heart to notice his presence. Have you noticed it's challenging to hear a whisper amidst so much noise? Sometimes, God speaks softly, nearly a whisper, requiring you to pause completely to hear him clearly. Psalm 46:10 reminds us powerfully, "Be still and know that I am God." This means sometimes God allows silence so you fully realize who he truly is in your life. Not a distant God or one who ignores you, but a Father desiring you to approach him with genuine trust and rest. This silence isn't punishment. It's an invitation to deeper trust, authentic relationship, and complete surrender. What if this silence you're experiencing now is God's invitation to draw closer to him? What if silence is precisely where he wants to teach you the true meaning of trust? True trust isn't only believing when things go well, but trusting even when it seems impossible. God invites you beyond comfort to find a peace surpassing all understanding. Maybe you're still wondering, what if God never answers my questions? What if he remains silent forever? Indeed, there are times when God might not respond in the way you expect. But have you ever considered that his silence could actually be the answer you need at this very moment? Because genuine faith isn't built solely on clear answers, but on your ability to trust even when there's no immediate response. Remember the Apostle Paul. In 2 Corinthians 12, Paul begged God 3 times to remove his thorn in the flesh, the unbearable pain he faced. God didn't respond with immediate relief, but with a truth that changed everything. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes the answer you're seeking isn't instant relief, but rather the strength to endure what seems unbearable. Have you ever thought about that? Maybe God isn't silent because he doesn't hear you, but because he's already given you everything you need to endure this tough time. This divine grace, quiet yet powerful, is within you now, waiting for you to recognize and accept it. Don't just wait for the miracle that changes your circumstances. Acknowledge the miracle God is performing within your heart. Maybe you're experiencing this silence right now, desperate for an answer, a sign, or clear guidance. But what if the greatest sign God can give you at this moment is precisely his silence? Not an empty silence, but one that says, "Trust me. I know what lies ahead." Can you trust God even when everything inside you demands answers? Think of Abraham, called to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Can you imagine the pain and questions he must have felt as he silently walked toward Mount Moriah? Abraham didn't receive clear answers or assurances up front, just a quiet divine command. Yet, he trusted deeply in God. When everything seemed hopeless, God provided a way out, showing Abraham he would never abandon him. Abraham learned that true trust isn't built on immediate answers, but on confidence in God's faithfulness. And today, God may be asking precisely this from you, to keep walking even when you can't see the next step. He's asking you to trust in his faithfulness, even if you don't understand his ways, because true faith doesn't mean an absence of doubts, but is the conscious decision to believe in God's love and plans despite uncertainty. Perhaps now you're beginning to see that silence doesn't mean absence, but rather a profound presence. Like a mother silently watching over her sleeping child, God is right beside you, watching, protecting, even if you don't sense his presence. He doesn't always need to speak for you to know he's there. Silence could be exactly how God embraces you, offering comfort, protection, and spiritual renewal. Isaiah 41:10 reminds us powerfully, Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Even in your darkest, quietest moments, you are never truly alone. God is profoundly present, silently working in your heart, shaping you into someone stronger and more resilient than you ever imagined you could be. The question now is this: are you willing to embrace silence as part of the journey God chose for you? Are you willing to let this apparent absence become a powerful presence that transforms, heals, and renews you? Because that is exactly what God desires to do in your life through this moment of silence. A deep, lasting work capable of completely transforming your relationship with Him. Often, God's silence is a special invitation into deeper intimacy with Him. Consider a true friendship. The deepest moments aren't necessarily filled with words, but rather in the comfort of quiet companionship. It's the same with God. Silence can be His invitation for you to draw closer, to learn to recognize His presence not just in clear answers, but in the quietness of your heart. Remember the promise in James 4:8, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you." Perhaps the silence you're experiencing is precisely your opportunity to take that step closer to God. In this silence, you might discover a relationship with Him deeper than anything you've ever known, not just a relationship based on what He can do for you, but on who He truly is. Have you considered that perhaps this is exactly why God is silent now? So you'll stop merely seeking answers, solutions, and instant miracles and start seeking God for who He is, your Father, your friend, your Creator? He wants so much more than to solve your problems. He wants a genuine, profound connection with you that can completely transform your life. Hear this clearly. You might feel completely alone in this silence, but you're not. Right now, countless others around you are experiencing exactly the same feelings. People asking the same questions. Where is God when I need Him the most? What you're feeling is shared by many others. People seeking answers, comfort, and hope, just like you. Most importantly, God is right there, in the middle of the silence beside you, waiting for you to notice His presence. Hebrews 13:5 reassures us strongly, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." That promise is for you. In the hardest moments when prayers seem to bounce off the ceiling, God is closer than ever. Maybe He's silent because He wants you to trust not in what you see or feel, but in what He promised. Silence isn't God's absence. It's His invitation for you to strengthen your trust in Him. My friend, maybe it's time to change your perspective on silence. Instead of seeing it as abandonment, see it as God's quiet embrace saying, "I believe in you. I'm here even when you don't hear me." God knows exactly what you need, when you need it, and how you need it. And even as you watch this video now, He's closer than you could ever imagine. It's time to turn this silence into action. Enough passively waiting for answers. The question now is, what will you do while God seems silent? Maybe God is exactly waiting for this initiative from you, a step into active trust. It's no longer about waiting, but acting as if God has already clearly spoken into your heart, because in fact, He already has through His promises. Think of the Israelites at the Red Sea. Surrounded by enemies, seemingly trapped, God told Moses, "Tell the Israelites to move forward." Exodus 14:15. God didn't explain when or how the sea would part. He simply asked them to step forward in faith, despite the silence. And when they took that step, the miracle happened. Maybe that's precisely what God expects from you now, to move forward, to take the next step, even without hearing His voice clearly. Now is the moment to move from being a victim of silence to becoming victorious through faith. Your future isn't determined by what God hasn't yet said, but by what He's already promised. You don't need a new answer to believe in God's faithfulness. Act today, right now, as someone who already has everything they need, because God is with you and He will never abandon you. Now it's your turn. The time has come to write the next chapter of your life, a chapter where God's silence doesn't defeat you but strengthens you. Remember, The greatest testimonies of faith often emerge from the hardest moments. You're not going through this difficult time by accident. God trusts you to carry a powerful message of hope. Your experience today can become the testimony that saves someone tomorrow. Maybe you still don't fully understand why God chose silence, but one thing you can know with absolute certainty: He is by your side. He has never left you, and He never will. Just as promised in Isaiah 43:2, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flames shall not consume you." The pain is temporary, but God's promises are eternal. Today, turn silence into your greatest strength. Choose to believe. Choose to move forward. Choose to trust, even without fully understanding. God has already written an extraordinary future for you. Now you must take that first step, believing that His presence is stronger than any silence. If this message touched your heart, comment "Amen" below. Don't forget to like and share, because someone you know might be needing exactly these words today. Silence is not your end. It's just the beginning of something amazing that God is preparing especially for you.